Okay, welcome back. This is Chapter 6. Chapter 6 is all about telecommunications. Let's look at the learning objectives. That's always a good place to start. They talk about identify and describe the fundamental concepts of telecommunications. Yep. Discuss two broad categories of telecommunication media and their associated characteristics. We're not going to get into the weeds on, cable length and frequencies and megabits per second. I'm not going to have you memorize all that junk. Briefly describe several options for short range, medium range, and long range communication. Yep. Identify the benefits of using a network, although that seems somewhat obvious. Describe three distributed processing alternatives. Identify several telecommunication hardware devices, and list and describe network applications. Okay. I always like this gold section. The gold section basically says, why do I need to learn this? And first of all, it should be somewhat fairly intuitive. I know people that go into, withdrawal symptoms if their phone dies. They can't check their Facebook account or they can't send text messages. So businesses are very similar to that. Their lifeblood is communicating. It could be, voice communication. It could be data. It could be lots of other things. But yeah, most businesses today would go out of business if it weren't for, their continued use of some sort of a communication system. Okay. So continuing, the first section is kind of like an overview of telecommunications as a whole. And they have some terms here. And this is two terms they talk about is the media and or medium, and the signal. Medium is like the wire. Okay, so here's the parts. You have to have some sort of a sending computer, right? Something that sends a message, and then that signal is put on a wire, and it goes to some sort of a telecommunication device, most likely some sort of modem, like this is at your home, and then that perhaps a different type of signal gets thrown on a different type of media and runs across town and then goes to another device, and then the signal gets put on a different media and goes to another computer. So it's all about mixing media types and signal types. That's what this whole thing is about. And it is kind of a puzzle. You have to have one puzzle piece to exactly match the next one, and next one. So what's the difference between a medium and a signal? Okay, that'd be a good test question. The term in here called protocols, and a protocol in the most generic sense of a network protocol is a set of rules that everyone has to play. It's not any different than you going to a foreign country and you both agree to speak English. In order for you to talk, you have to agree upon the language that you're talking. Same thing with telecommunications. I can't have one device trying to talk using a different protocol and the other device doesn't understand that protocol. So in most telecommunication systems, there's sort of like a negotiation that occurs. When they wake up, it's possible this device could actually say, hey, what do you got? And the guy says, well, I can talk this, and this. They go, okay, let's both use this one. They go, okay, good. And then they start the communication. That's overly simplified, but that's kind of sort of the way it works. Okay. So, the next thing to talk about is synchronous and asynchronous. So, synchronous communication means I send something to you, and it's sort of like instant messaging. I send it to you, and you immediately get it. There's hardly any delay whatsoever. So that's synchronous, meaning that it's almost real time. Sure, there's going to be a couple seconds delay, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about you're doing a chat session, and you'll be able to see what everybody else is typing and showing up on your screen. Asynchronous is more like email, where you send an email, you don't have any idea when they're going to read it. It could be they could read it immediately, or perhaps they'll read it tomorrow or next week. So one is almost real time, and the other is I just push it down the pipe, and they read it whenever they get around it. So those are those two terms that are kind of sort of interesting. They make a distinction talking about channels, and this is kind of an interesting term. a communication channel. And there's an awful lot of weird terms here, kind of in the margin. And you just go down the margin notes there on page 264, and you're in pretty good shape. So let's go through these terms because they're kind of weird. The first one is simplex. Simplex channel is a one-way communication. In other words, I blast something out and that's it. There's no two-way, there's no response. And the classic example in the real world is, a radio station. Radio station is playing music and I have a radio receiver, but my receiver doesn't send anything back to the radio station. It's one-way communication. So cool, that's simplex. The next one is half duplex. Now that means I can send back and forth on the same wire, but I can't do it at the same time. We can't both talk, so it has to be, somebody says something and then you wait, and then somebody else sends something back. So it's back and it's forth, and it's back and it's forth. And oddly enough, an awful lot of systems use this, and you may not even be aware of it. For example, the early cable modems that were available were half duplex. In other words, you could send or you could receive, but you can't do both. Now there's the new version of that version 3 of their little protocol standard that actually allows you to do back and forth conversation at the same time. Okay, contrast that with full duplex, which means we both can be talking at the same time. So think about this. This is more like you're at a conference room and you've got somebody on speakerphone, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? You're all sitting around the conference room while the guy is talking. He can't hear you. And so, you basically have to wait for him to stop talking for you to say, wait a minute, I had a question. Full duplex means, I'm on the phone and we can harmonize. We can be singing on the phone, both of us singing at the same time. And so we're listening and talking simultaneously. Cool. Bandwidth. Bandwidth is really a bad term. In the radio days, bandwidth meant something very, very specific. It was talking about how much of the spectrum is being used. Was it really, really narrow kind of a transmission, or was it spread over more frequencies? And so broadband meant something in the radio days. Now broadband has been kind of overtaken by the hipsters, and so broadband just basically means it's fast, and so it no longer means anything. So channel bandwidth refers to, okay, it's supposed to be how much of the medium you're using, but it's really the rate. So bandwidth is the rate. Okay, I know it's a little weird. I wish they would have kind of stuck with the same thing. So basically, it just means the speed. All right, the next thing we're going to talk about is the type of switching. In the old days, when I dialed a number on my phone, okay, we're talking 30 years ago, you pick up your phone and you dialed grandma, and what was happening is they were building a circuit as you were dialing. As you were dialing, the machine was going, oh, well, let's connect this wire to this one in Cincinnati, and we'll connect this wire in Cincinnati to this one over here in Akron. And so it built me a circuit. And so when the circuit was completed, then the phone rang and grandma answered the phone. Okay, so there was no circuit between your phone and grandma's phone until you dialed, right? Okay. This really isn't used anymore. Not anywhere. I mean, I can't tell for sure, but for all intents and purposes, circuit switching telephone systems are the dodo bird. They've long since gone. Now what happens is when I pick up the phone, it's going to not build me an honest-to-God... Okay, let me give you another example. This is kind of a stupid example, but we actually, in the old days, we actually had a wire that connected my phone to your phone. An honest-to-God real copper wire made the path all the way across town. And if I was going to be something stupid, for example, this sounds like a stupid example, but if I was like to put a battery and put it on the wire, you could get shocked at the other end. It was an honest-to-God physical circuit. Okay. That doesn't exist. And now we're doing packet switching. And packet switching basically means I pick up the phone. Yeah, it kind of sort of builds a circuit, but it's not, it's all electronic. There's no real physical wire that's connecting all the way across. You can imagine in the old days when you had circuit switching and there was a thunderstorm going on. I mean, there was a wire that went along the poles between my house and your house that connected our phones together. And in the old days, there was some significant threat of, you getting damaged, perhaps even killed by a lightning strike in your area because of circuit switching. Okay, I think I beat that one to death. Let's move on. Packet switching is my voice is broken up into individual little packets behind the scenes, digitized and broke up into packets, and the packets are sent down the pipe. And the really cool thing about this is the packets do not have to use the exact same path. I mean, one packet could be going this route and another packet could be going this route. You don't really know which route they took. If this one starts to get congestion, maybe they'll shut that one down and reroute it around something. So packet switching is all about kind of a dynamic thing where you have to break things up into small pieces. You send them down the wire, and it could be that congestion in one place meant that halfway through your conversation, it's now taking a different path to get between the two phones. So this is a lot more failure resistant. This guy, if a car hit a pole, well, but your phone was just out and your conversation dropped like a rock. Here, if somebody hits a telephone pole, it'll just automatically route around it someplace and you'll keep on talking. Most likely, you won't even know that the thing was down. Okay, so that's what packet switching is all about. Whew. Okay. Now we talk about the media. And, you used to be they would say wired and wireless, right? Wire is kind of a poor choice of words because maybe I'm using fiber optic cable. So instead of saying wired, they say guided. Guided media. Well, that sounds pretty cool, huh? So guided media means some sort of a cable, okay? It could be a copper cable or it could be a fiber optic cable, but some sort of a cable. So guided media. Here's basically three types of guided media that exist. The twisted pair. This is like the phone cord kind of thing that you have, most likely you have in your house. It's basically just copper wires that are twisted, insulation on them, but they're twisted, and perhaps there's a whole bundle of them in a little sheath, so you could run like your network cord. That's like very similar to your phone cord, but it has more wires in it. And so that's just a standard cord that you use to plug in your network if you have that kind of stuff. Coaxial cable. This is like the cable TV stuff, right? In the old days, we used coaxial cable for doing networks inside buildings. We don't do that much now. And then fiber optic cable, which is really cool. It's really designed for much, much greater distances, but it's pretty doggone expensive. And it takes a guy with a pair of pliers can build one of these with no trouble at all. A guy with a pair of pliers can put an end on one of those cables. This takes a little finesse. I mean, you need to get a little toolkit, and quite frankly, probably the first time you did it, you probably could do it pretty badly, and it takes, a little bit of practice and a little toolkit to be able to put the ends on a fiber optic cable. Okay. There's some charts here that I'm not going to have you memorize, but, just pretty pictures, twisted pair. So each one of these little pairs are twisted together, and in this case, there's 4 of them inside a sheath. Coaxial cable means there's a cladding on the outside designed to keep radio interference and signal degradation, an insulator, and then a solid core in the middle, and then fiber optic cable, which is really cool stuff. Okay. All right. Here's an example of some wireless types. So we had guided, and then we have wireless. Oh, doggone it! I guess this is a good place to stop for the 15-minute mark. We'll pick this thing up again in just a few.